What's up guys, I'm DDP and today I'm going to be talking about the 2018 NFL Draft Haul for the Dallas Cowboys. All of that's coming up after the bumper. Now if you were watching our live remote for round 1 of the NFL Draft this past Thursday, you probably saw that I wasn't too thrilled with the Cowboys pick at 19.
Alright, here it is, hush.
Children.
Oh, God, they did it.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
God, they did it.
I've come to talk with you again. Because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping.
That is the face of a broken man. However, after further review, I've decided to take a more optimistic overview of Layton Vander. Yes, I am still concerned with his neck. No, I would not have taken him at 19. I still feel you could have gotten him in round 2. I would have rather had Harold Landry, which I made abundantly clear during the live remote. However, this is the guy we got, and I still think he is a solid player, even if I think you had to reach for him a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about Layton Vander. The guy was a tackling machine at Boise State this past season, racking up more than 100 tackles and had a knack for forcing turnovers, forcing fumbles, even a couple interceptions. He is a linebacker who is capable of dropping back into coverage, can cover sideline to sideline, which, we saw that as well because before he was at Boise State, his only football experience was 8-on-8, which means he had more space he had to cover himself. So in this case, it actually helps. However, there are glaring issues with his game, I feel. I feel like he is way too high of a tackler, his technique's not good, and I don't think he's a great run stopper. That said, the Cowboys took Layton Vander over Rashaan Evans from Alabama, who was also there and went the very next pick, because they felt that it would be easier. First of all, they felt that Layton Vander fit their scheme better. They need their linebackers to cover, to drop back into coverage, more than they need them to rush the line of scrimmage or the quarterback. As a result, they picked Vander. They felt it would be easier for them to teach Vander how to be a competent run stopper than it would be for Rashaan Evans to learn how to drop back into coverage, which was not his strength in college. Rashaan Evans made a career of stopping the run and getting after the quarterback, which is not what Dallas asks of its linebackers in a Rod Marinelli defense. Thus, we found ourselves with Thad Castle from Blue Mountain State. I mean Layton Vander.
Nice hit. Look at the fun.
Oh, hey. Oh, yeah, what he said. Great hit. And you smell great.
You're not gonna slap my ass?
I wasn't planning on it, no.
It is a bit uncanny, though. Now, how high are the Cowboys on Layton Vander, you ask? Well, apparently Rod Marinelli sees the guy as a Brian Urlacher style linebacker. I don't know about that. He's 6'4", 256, but man, I don't see a lot of physicality to his game. Maybe they think that they can improve that by teaching him better technique, but this feels like a weird reach for me for another Boise State player. All the same, I'm not even going to address that. I don't even think that, I don't think he's a Brian Urlacher. Maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong. I'll gladly take being wrong on this. I say that all the time. So let's move on to round 2. In round 2, the Cowboys had the 50th pick earmarked for the Earl Thomas trade, and it sounds like they were actually ready to pull the trigger on that deal. However, when they found that Connor Williams, who they rated as the 3rd best tackle in the draft, was still available at 50, they decided to reinforce the offensive line as opposed to going to get Earl Thomas. Now that says everything you need to know right there about the Cowboys' philosophy. They are built around the offensive line. Yes, they wanted to improve the secondary. Yes, Earl Thomas is exactly the kind of dog and leader that they need to take this defense to the next level, to be a top 3 defense. However, they decided to stick with their strongest point and build the identity around the run game. Thus, Connor Williams became a Cowboy. Now the thing about Connor Williams that I like, in 3 years at Texas, he allowed 1 sack. Fun fact, he allowed it to fellow Cowboys draft pick, defensive end out of Kansas, Dorrance Armstrong. Now Dorrance, he's a little bit of a raw talent. He's got a high ceiling for sure, but he's even more of a question mark, I think, moving forward. I'm not even really going to highlight him much other than to say if you get the height anywhere near his ceiling as far as what we saw 2 years ago, he could be a nice rotational player for the defensive line. But back to Connor Williams. Connor Williams, to me, is a legitimate immediate day one left guard starter. The guy, I don't think he has quite the size and weight. I think he's just under 300 pounds. I don't think he has the size to be a tackle, but we're talking about a guy who is very good quick step, good hands, great footwork, and he can presumably slide right into the starting left guard spot and make this offensive line the baddest in football again. They were not that in 2017, and that was a big part of why the team struggled. Now, whether or not he stays at left guard long term, or if this is also double insurance for the event of, let's say, Tyron Smith getting injured again or breaking down physically because of his back, well, now they have insurance because you got Cam Fleming for this year. I think he's going to be your swing tackle, but I think if we're talking 2-3 years in the future, they could see Connor Williams as being able to slide back over to left tackle at that point and fill the void left, if it happens, from Tyron Smith. So I like it. It's a smart pick. Would I have liked Earl Thomas at 50? Yeah, but at the same time, I think this works for their identity. They already felt like they had a good defense that was only getting better and better last year. They added Chris Richard. They're moving Byron Jones back to corner. I think that they look across the board and think that they're going to be a better defense already, and this was a rare opportunity for them to take that offensive line and address one of their biggest needs with one of the best players they had on the board. So, I like it. Now, let's talk about round 3. I love this pick. I really think this is a difference-making pick for the Dallas Cowboys. Interestingly enough, there is still an Earl Thomas connection. Dallas actually offered pick 3 to Seattle, and Seattle didn't give them an answer by the end of their window. So when Dallas had to make a pick, they just went and made a pick instead of increasing their offer to Seattle, and I like that. Here's the thing, I want Earl Thomas. I can say that again and again and again. I want Earl Thomas on the Cowboys, but I was already weary of giving up more than a 2. If you're now telling me Seattle wanted a 3 and additional picks or something like that, unless we were talking about one of the 4s maybe, I just don't like it. If Seattle was intent on getting nothing but a 2 and a 3 or something, then I think this is better off. So let's talk about Michael Gallup, a player the Cowboys did pick. Michael Gallup was a beast the last 2 years at Colorado State. In the last 2 seasons, he caught 176 passes for 2,690 yards and 21 touchdowns. Now, Colorado State might not always have the best competition, but he did go against Alabama and still put up 100 yards and a touchdown. So the guy can get his. He can eat. He is a nuanced route runner. Very, very good route runner. Probably the 3rd, maybe depending on what board you look at, maybe 4th best overall receiver in the draft. So if we're talking about getting this guy at pick 81, that's a huge steal. This dude has size. He doesn't have great acceleration, but he's got size. He's got reasonable speed. He's got strong hands, great vertical, can go up and win jump balls. Here's what I really love about him. He doesn't body catch. He goes up and he snatches the ball out of the air. Right there you see strong hands, just snatches the ball. Look at this one. He's got a little Des Bryant to his game. I know Big Game James also referenced that he's got a little bit of Anquan Bolden to him a little bit. I could see that. And yeah, he is a confident guy. He will talk and he will let you know about it. But I love this pick. I think this is a very good pickup. This is a guy who, you know, he's not a home run threat, I don't think. He's very good when he has the ball in his hands, and he's a very good route runner, can run a lot of different routes. But I think he complements well with the other moves the Cowboys made in their receiving core changeup. Here's something for you as well. I think by the end of this season, he could become your new #1 receiver, your new X. Because what competition does he really have for that right now? Noah Brown? Allen Hurns? I mean, as far as an X-type receiver, he doesn't have a lot of competition. Hearns is solid. I love the Hearns signing, but I think Hearns can work out of the slot or work in the Y. So we'll see what happens there, but I'm very excited about this pick. This was one of the few picks that when they made it, I immediately popped. So let's talk a little bit more about the changeup they made to the receiving core. Now this one's a little bit of a technicality right off the bat. The Cowboys ended up swinging a pick for Tavon Austin, the longtime Rams receiver slash sort of running back. I was surprised by the move, admittedly. I did not think that Tavon Austin was in the plans, but we are talking about a guy with speed and explosiveness in spades. He is great in the open field with the ball in his hands. The only thing that's really a knock against him is that the Rams in his career have never figured out how to properly utilize him. And at the same time, I know he's had a little bit of fumble issues. Dallas is going to have to work with that, obviously. But here are the reasons I really love this move. Tavon Austin was slated to get paid $7 million this season. Dallas, however they did it in the deal, instead, even if he plays all 16 games, Dallas owes at most $3 million of that salary. So we're getting a guy at a steal. Now granted, you could argue, well, he's a third down back. True, but at the same time, he's bringing a dimension to your game that you've lacked since Lance Dunbar left, and I think he can frankly do it better, because as I implied, Dallas sees him as more of a running back than a wide receiver. But at the same time, because he has those wide receiver skills, he can finally do the thing I've wanted Dallas to do. Have a guy, whether it's Zeke or whoever else, who can play out of the backfield and at the same time catch a team sleeping by spreading out wide. That is a matchup nightmare for teams. So if Dallas is going to use him as a Lance Dunbar mold running back and then also have the ability to spread him out to the slot or something, that's a nightmare for a team to have to cover. So I love this move. Across the board, I love this move. I'm curious to see what kind of dedication we get out of him. It sounds like from his comments, this is really revitalizing him. So I'm very hopeful that he and Dak can kind of build a nice little rapport, because his acquisition actually opened the door for the Cowboys to make another move, which would lead to a popular Cowboy departing from the team in Ryan Switzer. Now Ryan Switzer, I was honestly surprised when they traded him, because I felt like he had 1 year, which you usually give a guy more than 1 year to do something. But he had 1 year. They didn't run him much out of the slot, and I was a little surprised how little they utilized him. But they did use him in the return game. Although even then, because he was so overconfident and tried to run everything back, whether it was a kickoff, a punt return, whatever, you started seeing them basically take him off the field, and they started putting Cole Beasley back there, or they started putting one of their reserve running backs back there instead. And that spoke volumes, but at the same time, you saw the guy flash his talent. He did have a punt return for a touchdown against the Redskins, so he flashed that ability. But to some people, this felt like a panic move when they took him anyway in the 4th round. I didn't share that opinion. I actually loved the pick. But all the same, Dallas has decided to move on from Ryan Switzer. They ship him, not Cole Beasley surprisingly, they ship him to Oakland for defensive tackle Jihad Ward. Now, Jihad Ward is 6'6" and 24 years old. So while we're talking about a guy with 1 career sack, it's worth noting he barely played last season. He was pretty productive in 2016, but barely played in 2017. So maybe even though he's raw, because of his size and because of his age, Rod Marinelli can find a way to make him into a viable player, because defensive tackle was a need for this team, and they were crowded at receiver. So it's not a bad move. It's a surprising move, I think. When they traded for Tavon Austin, I really assumed that was going to mark the end of Cole Beasley's time in Dallas, because the slot in particular was becoming very crowded. You had Cole Beasley, you had Ryan Switzer, you had Allen Hurns, who last season with Jacksonville played 73% of his snaps from the slot, and you have Deontay Thompson, who can play the slot. That's just too many guys to spread the ball around. What they don't have a lot of are the bigger guys. They have Noah Brown, they have now Michael Gallup. So it's really interesting how Dallas is kind of remodeling the receiving core. But all the same, They didn't draft a defensive tackle, but they did make a move for one. So I don't hate the move. I'm a little surprised by who they picked for the move. Maybe Oakland just didn't have interest in Beasley because of his age and contract. Possibly. If that's the case, it's basically like trading draft picks. So we'll see how that pans out. The other big news we had during the draft was that Jason Witten is abruptly retiring to become a broadcaster for Monday Night Football. Now that's really great for him. These opportunities don't come around very often, and we are talking about the modern day Mr. Cowboy, a all-time franchise great. He's 4th all-time in receiving yards for the NFL, so the guy's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt, no doubt. And just as people were disappointed that the Cowboys never won a championship with Tony Romo, they should be equally, if not more so, disappointed they didn't win one with Jason Witten, because he did everything right, everything you would want your franchise to be represented by. That was Jason Witten. So I love you, Witt. I think this was probably the best move for both you and the Cowboys, honestly. But it's still, Cowboys abruptly had to address tight end in the draft. And you know, this one was not mentioned really at all, but you also had James Hanna, another tight end, retire. And to me, Dalton Schultz, the 5th round pick out of Stanford, that to me is more of an indicator of a James Hanna replacement, at least in the immediate, than it is a Jason Witten replacement. And I say that because Hanna was a blocking tight end. Schultz is a blocking tight end. He is a great blocker, comes from a pro-style offense that has produced several good tight ends in recent years, and he's got nice hands. I mean, he can catch the ball a little bit. I think he had 55 receptions, so he can catch the ball a little bit. You want to do more with that, perhaps, but at the same time, I like the pick a lot for the 5th round. I think it's a solid pickup. It, again, strengthens that run game while at the same time giving you a guy who can become a target in the passing game. He's got good size too, so overall, I'm happy with the Cowboys draft. I really am. Now, it's not, let me put it this way. No move they made felt like a splash, but at the same time, I feel like they got better. I feel like of all the teams that got better throughout the draft this year, you could put the Cowboys in probably the top 3, maybe top 5 of the teams that got better. They are in that ranking. I think they did very well while making surprisingly little splash. The closest thing to a splash to me was Michael Gallup, but it felt like a lot of smart blue-collar guys that they picked up, and that's good. That really is good. Layton Vander Esch is not a sexy pick. He's not. Harold Landry would have been a sexy pick. I'm a little biased there, I guess. But at the same time, Connor Williams making that decision instead of Earl Thomas. Earl Thomas would have been the splashy move, but Connor Williams, I think, makes you better in the immediate and has a longer window of how long he can keep you better. Whereas we're talking about a, 3-year window with Earl Thomas at this level. And, you know, Earl Thomas, he's still holding out from Seattle. There could still be a deal. Dallas remains interested in acquiring him, and at the same time, he's free after this year. So maybe within the next 12 months, at some point, Dallas can get him. That'd be great. I think he takes this defense to the next level, makes him a top 3 defense, but Dallas stuck with their identity, and their identity is the offensive line and the run game, so can't fault them there. I like the pick of Connor Williams, even if it doesn't have the splash factor. Michael Gallup, that one to me feels like a pretty nice splash. At 81, maybe it's not like a cannonball, let me put it that way. It's a modest splash, but at the same time, guys who look at his film know that he was probably the 3rd or 4th best wide receiver overall, and so to get him at pick 81 is pretty solid. I know Dallas had a lot of interest in Cortland Sutton. Frankly, I didn't. He's too raw for my liking. Cortland Sutton's also a baby Dez, and I didn't think that they wanted to stick in that direction. Michael Gallup has some Dez tendencies, but has a lot of other stuff that's better, I think, as far as route running, as far as hands, etc. The acquisitions of Tavon Austin and Jihad Ward address 2 other things. Really, the only thing Dallas didn't address at all that I wanted them to address was safety. I wanted Derwin James or I wanted to trade for Earl Thomas. I was fine with either of those. If they didn't get that, I wanted, also from Stanford here, I wanted Reed. And they didn't get him. And it sounds like they wanted him. It sounds like they had him earmarked at one point to go get. And he got snatched up before it got back around to him. And so instead they wound up taking... Ooh, who was it they took at that spot? I can't remember off the top of my head, but they wanted him. Another guy that they had interest in late that they kept letting him slip a little bit and didn't end up getting him. Instead, Baltimore got him was Deshaun Elliott. That one was a little surprising to me. I thought he was worth taking in the 5th, but they took quarterback Mike White instead out of Western Kentucky. Now, the thing about Mike White, some people might be confused because they're like, well, if Dak's your guy and you got Cooper Rush, why are you still drafting a quarterback? You draft a quarterback because you take a quarterback every year. Worst case scenario, he doesn't work out. Best case scenario, you build him up, and whether he becomes your new backup or hell, maybe one day your starter. If that doesn't work out, fine. You build up his value, you flip him for draft picks like New England does. Green Bay used to do it, now New England does it, and that's the smart way to go. You build up. There's such a desperate need to find quarterbacks. Teams will overpay. Look at 2015 for Dallas. They made a trade for Matt Castle just out of panic because they didn't like what they were seeing out of Brandon Whedon, and they weren't ready to give up on the season yet. So it is what it is, man. You take a quarterback every year because you're going to give yourself more chances, and the worst thing that can happen is it doesn't work out. We're talking about a guy, though, who, yes, Western Kentucky does not play a lot of top-shelf competition, but we're talking about a guy who had 63 touchdowns and 15 interceptions in his last 2 years. And we're talking about a guy who at the Senior Bowl still was lighting up some really good players. So there's something to be said there. I like the pick a lot, especially in round 5. It makes sense to me to make that call. But yeah, overall, I would say the Cowboys had themselves a very nice draft. Kind of a modest draft, frankly, in terms of name value and things like that. But it feels like they got better, and we'll see how well it can play out. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised, particularly by your first 3 picks. I think Layton Vander Esch is going to be competent, at least, at linebacker as a rookie. I think you're going to see a solid performance, not necessarily a Zach Martin-like rookie year out of Connor Williams, but you're going to see some good production out of Connor Williams. And I really do think that Michael Gallup is going to really impress this year. Now, he's not going to replace Dez production. I'm not making that accusation. I'm just saying I think he's going to be a standout player where by the end of the year, guys are looking at him like, man, he might as well be the #1 receiver. But we'll see, man. It's going to be fun. Now we go into a little bit of a lull while we have some voluntary workouts and all that, and we'll be gearing up come training camp. So if you like this video, guys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'm Darreck Kirby, aka DDP from the Dallas Prospect. And until next time, guys, remember, every legend was once a prospect.